My name is Kim Jones. I am 42 years young. I was born and raised partially in Brooklyn, New York, and I believe at the age of 9 or 10 we relocated abruptly to Florida. That's where I mainly grew up for about 15 and a half years, and we dated for, I want to say, maybe 2 years. That's what you want to call it. And we had Janess. And we were going to church, and I had met him there. At that, it wasn't love, it was simply lust, but at that age you think every person you're with is love. So his aunt was the pastor of the church. We planned Janess so foolishly at very young, tender ages. When I was pregnant with Janess, it wasn't a happy pregnancy because he left me. I was very depressed during my pregnancy. When Janess was about, I want to say 3-ish or 4-ish, I just told my mom, like, I can't do it. You know, she's my first child. I had no help from him, and I was bitter. And it's not that I didn't love her. I didn't love myself for bringing a child in this world so foolishly. I was living in the projects in Florida on welfare and no degree, just a high school diploma from an alternative school, you know, nothing going for myself except being a customer service agent. I think I was selling kid books. And my mom said, all right, well, if you want to go live your life, I'll watch her. And that was all she had to say. And I went right to New York to live with my dad, and then I got my own place in New York, and it was a room in someone's house. And then from there, I went to Boston to live with my homegirl, and that fell through. And my mom had called me and said, you know, it's time for you to be a mother. And I believe Janess was about going on 7 then. And so when she sent Janess to live with me in Boston, so I had to go find housing. And the Boston Department of Social Services put us up in a hotel, Janess and I. And I think we were there for maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then they called and told us to pack our things. They found us a woman and child shelter, so we stayed there, got involved with a church, CFCF. There was a Stop and Shop down the street from the shelter, a grocery store, and I went there with Janess, and I speak to the manager, and when he came downstairs, I introduced myself, shook his hand, and I said, listen, just got in the shelter yesterday, the one down the street. I said, I don't have a job. I need to get out of there. Can you hire me? What can I do? And he says, well, we need cashiers. And I'm thinking, God, you know, I'm in my early 30s. I'm going to be a cashier again. You know, it was humbling. And I said, all right, well, how much will you start me? And he said, well, what's your experience? So I told him, he said, well, no more than about $7.50. And I just was like, $7? I told him, okay. And he gave me an application. Matter of fact, no, he told me to go on the website. I had a laptop, so went back to the shelter, filled out the application at night, called him for about 4 days, finally got him, came in for an interview with Janess. Told Janess, sit down downstairs. She was a very manable young girl. So she came up and waited in the hallway, had my interview, and I started working there, and I saved up my money. And the people, in 3 months, the middle of November 2008, I found an apartment. It was about maybe 7 blocks away from the shelter. It's a nice apartment. Then there was a small room on the side and the master bedroom, which really wasn't master, but it would have been our own. So I applied for it, and I had an interview with the management company. Janess and I walked all the way from Stop and Shop, all the way there. Had to figure out where it was, and the lady came out and we walked around the block. She showed us the apartment. And the apartment was originally $1,000 and something. And while she's talking, I'm thinking, how am I going to afford that on $7.50? And she's just talking, and Janess is like, this is my room. And I'm thinking, well, that's the only room that could be yours. And she said, so all we need is $1,000 down payment. And I'm thinking, dag nabbit, I don't have $1,000. So I said, okay, I'll get it. I left there, and Janess says, where are we going to get $1,000? I said, Janess, I don't know, but you will not spend Christmas in the shelter. And so we went to church that following, and I remember I spoke to my pastor afterwards, Pastor Jeff Bianchi. I told him what happened, and he said, God's going to provide that $1,000. I said, I know he will. And that Monday I was off, and the intake lady came up to our room and knocked on the door, and she said, because I had emailed her and told her what happened, and she said, you know, I remember when I met you, and she said, I want to apologize to you. She said, when you told me you wouldn't allow your daughter to spend Christmas in a shelter, she said, I just thought, wow, she's really ambitious and tenacious. And I said, I am. And she said, when I read your email, I couldn't believe what you told me. And she said, I told my director about you. And she went in her briefcase or whatever bag she had, and she pulled out a check, and she said, he personally wrote you a check for your down payment. And I just started crying. And I looked up and I said, God, I thank you. And she said, yeah, so congratulations. And she said, you are the first person, she said, that I have ever seen push so hard. And I said, I told you I will not let my child spend Christmas in a shelter. And I meant that. And it was about 2 weeks before Christmas. These people furnished our entire apartment, down to forks, down to soap, a bed for Janess, a couch, a bed for me. I mean, literally furnished. The same apartment Janess died in, it was the same apartment they furnished. And after everybody moved us in, it was about 18 of us all stood in the living room in a big circle, and we just prayed. And I'll just never forget that. And that's how we moved out of a shelter into our own apartment. I did not want Janess because her father had left me. He wasn't there. He wasn't a good father. I felt like I made the foolish mistake of my life having her. And I just always thank God for my mother, Colleen, and my sister, Daria, because they took her. When it was time for her to come back, I realized I was her friend. My mom was her mom. Everything I did, if I put a cigarette to my mouth, I'm calling grandma. My mom's in Florida. What is she going to do? I'm grown. But that's my truth. Janess was a sweet kid. My mom taught her how to pray. My mom taught her how to fold up clothes. When Janess went to live with me, Janess knew how to fold up her own clothes. Her room was cleaner than mine because my mom is a neat freak. Her shoes were always neat in the closet. I'm like, God, that is so my mom. I couldn't imagine. My determination was, you've never spent Christmas in a shelter. You will not spend Christmas in a shelter. It wasn't for anybody else, it was for her. If it was just me, I would have spent Christmas in a shelter. It was free. But I had her. My thing was to teach her the significance of a struggle. Because when you're given things, when you enter this world, you don't really have an appreciation for not having them. But when you work for something and you obtain it on your own legally, you have more of appreciation, or you should, to care for them. Then you sometimes, which I would hope people would do, you pay it forward. And she was just a good kid. And so I just wanted her to have the best. And at that time, I couldn't give her the best. So I had to humble myself, work as a cashier, 30-something, making nothing, save, and just show her this is what you do when you need to get what you want. So when she came to live with me, it was me trying to learn how to be a parent. She's a cool kid. Very sweet, very funny, very mannerable. Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Yes, thank you, no, thank you. My mom raised her well for the time period that she did. She loved the Lord. Janess was diagnosed with ADHD, I think at the age of 3 or 4, I can't remember. I never wanted her to feel inferior or incompetent. I always wanted her to know that no matter what you put your mind to, I don't care ADHD, ABC, I don't care what anybody says about you or any label anybody puts on you, the fact that you have 2 societal strikes against you, you're a woman and you're black, it doesn't matter. You can do all things. So if someone says something to her that she cannot do something, she needs to remember what you recite every single morning and counteract that with, yes, I can. And if I can't do it today, I'm going to work hard and try to do it tomorrow. She was into science. She loved flowers and leaves, and my mom's been a teacher for years, so when it was fall, she would ask Janess to get the yellow, hard leaves off the trees and make me wrap them up, put them in a Ziploc, and ship them to Florida for her. We bonded over Martin Lawrence, the TV show Martin. She liked watching Oddly, and this is when she told me she wanted to be an anesthesiologist. Not in those words, but when she described what she saw, that's what she meant. She loved helping people. I had signed her up for soccer at her school, and she stopped the game because her teammate fell on the floor as she was kicking the ball. And the coach said, Janess, what are you doing? Keep kicking. She said she fell. Just like, oh my God. Like, that was her. They lost the game because of Janess. But she said her teammate fell, and she literally stopped kicking the ball, turned around, and helped her teammate off the ground. Janess passed on October 5th, 2010. So I walked her to her school, and then I caught the trolley to the city. That morning I didn't drive my car to work. Janess was on the Latchkey Kid program, where at a certain age they can have a key and they could have a cell phone. So she knew, come home, lock the door behind you, wash your hands. I would always have a snack in the fridge for her, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or she would make it herself sometimes. And do your homework. Don't turn on TV until you do your homework. And she would always call me as soon as she got home. So that day she called, I was busy, really busy, closing up clinic, getting clinic ready to close up, and we had a lot of patients. And so when I answered the phone, I said, Janessa, I can't really speak right now. You home? You good? And she said, yes, this afternoon I wrote a poem in class. You want to hear it? And I told her I couldn't hear it right now. I said, just wash your hands, eat your snack, and do your homework. And her last words to me was, okay. And I just never forget that. I couldn't even take the time to listen to her poem. I found the poem. I still have the poem. But that just hurt me because, we run around so much in life and we forget the most important things. And you could hear the sadness in her voice when I told her that. I was like, all right, love you. And she said, I love you. And it just was like, blah. I just hung up the phone and I just knew I was going to see her that evening. So as I'm leaving work, I would always call her. So I kept calling her. I had called her 18 times. And when I was on the bus, something was just bothering me, like in my stomach. And when the bus stopped at my stop and I got off, as soon as I crossed the street, and every step I took is as if I was walking backwards. Like I started walking faster to the house, to the apartment. And I just felt like my body was walking backwards. I don't know how to explain it. I just felt like I wasn't getting closer to my apartment. And we had this thing where I would come to the door, because it was a building of apartments and we lived on the first floor, and our number was 4. And I would press it 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and it would buzz in the apartment. And then she would come out to the window, make sure it was me, and then I had the key, but she would come out of our apartment door and come down to the main door and open it. So I pressed it 3 times, and when she didn't come, I just knew. I thought somebody kidnapped her, somebody followed her home. Just so many thoughts was running through my mind. So I opened the front door to the building, then I walked up the steps and opened our door. Her shoes were at the floor, her book bag was on the back of the chair at the table, and her light was on, and I didn't go in her room. I stood at the door of her room, and I saw her homework or her folder with her stuff on the bed. And I was like, Janess, stop playing around, Janess. Where are you? And I never went in her room first. I turned around, I went in the bathroom, I pulled the shower curtain, and I said, Janess, stop playing, I'm not playing. And I went in my room. Our cat was in my closet, which was odd because our cat normally met me at the door. And I didn't realize that until after everything. And so when I opened the closet, she was way in the back. What are you doing in there? And so I'm still looking for Janessa. I look under my bed, and I was like, Jeanette. And then finally, leaving my room, I stopped in the hallway, and I called her. And so her phone started ringing. So I'm like, somebody done took my child. So I followed the ring, and I went in her room, and it was on the floor in front of her closet. And when I went to bend down to pick up her phone, that's when I saw her feet. And I just looked up. And it was just like I was in a whole different world. And I'm standing there looking at her face, looking at her tongue hanging out her mouth, looking at her eyes, looking at the whole expression. And I don't know to this day how long I stood there and looked at her, just in awe. And the scarf was wrapped around her neck. It looked like she was tangled because the scarf was tangled like that. And the hanger rack was broke. So the coroner, because when they came, they took pictures of it and showed it to the coroner. The coroner said it looked as if she was playing and she tried to get down. And when she did, the rack broke and it snapped her neck in two. And so I told my mom, I remember a big hand as I stood there slapped my right cheek. And it was as if I felt the slap on my face, and then I heard a voice say, take her down. And I just screamed. My neighbor in the basement told me maybe 3 weeks later, I heard you scream. And I was trying to dial 911, get the password right because my hands were shaking so much. And then I said, oh, she has a flip phone. So I took Janessa's phone, I dialed 911. And that was the beginning of pure hell in my life for about 5 years. Mental hell, physical hell, regret, shame, guilt. So the ambulance came right away because there was a hospital down the street from where we lived. And I remember the guy coming out, the surgeon or whoever he was, and I was sitting on the chair, he knelt down and he said, we had a heartbeat, but we lost it. Do you want us to continue to try with her? And I said, yes. And, I was crying. And he said, absolutely. He got up, he went. Then the guy came in again, the doctor, and he told me, I'm sorry, we couldn't save her, and I just lost it. And I remember after that, a lady came in and she knelt down in front of me and said, I know this is an awkward time for us to ask you this, but would you be willing to donate Janessa's organs? The only reason I said yes was because I think it was 2 weeks before that Janessa and I was watching TLC, Life in the ER or something like that. And there was a guy, something happened to him, and something had punctured his kidney or his liver, I can't remember. And Jay had asked me, what is that? You know, I was like, it's organs. The family said on the show that they wanted to donate his organs. And she said, well, so donate means what, Ma? I was like, donate. I said, you know how we went to Goodwill with your clothes one day and we gave to, so other kids can wear them? I said, you donated your clothes to Goodwill. She said, so give. I said, yes, give. You know, like, let me finish cooking. She said, well, I want to do that when I die. And I turned around, looked, and I said, Janessa, you want to donate your organs when you die? She says, can I use them when I'm dead? I said, no. She says, well, what am I keeping it for? That was the only reason I told that lady yes. Because of that conversation. Whether she really didn't know what she was saying at the time or not, those are words spoken out of her mouth. Until this day, I get letters from the Boston donation program or wherever of kids that one little boy received her cornea. I think a little girl received one of her lungs so far, and I always sign waivers that they send me that when the children get older, if they want to contact me, they'll have to reach out to them and they'll contact me, and then we can meet up so they can meet me or whatever. But I'm glad that her organs was able to save some kids' lives. That my pastor had put us up in a hotel because there was media at my apartment. My apartment was deemed a crime scene, so I couldn't even go in there for a few days. My phone was left in her room because I had chose to use her phone to dial 911, so I couldn't get my phone because it was a part of a crime scene. And I gave up my apartment and the management of my apartment. The same lady who showed me the apartment, they didn't charge me. Just told I can't stay here anymore. I left everything. I couldn't even work. My job raised money for me, but eventually they had to let me go because I wasn't even mentally stable to do anything. And I remember Carolyn, I would stay with her sometimes, and I would get up in the middle of the night because I was scared of the dark. Seeing her like that, I was terrified to sleep next to a closet. I was scared of the dark. I was scared to use the bathroom late in the night. I had tried to commit suicide. That didn't work. So I wasn't good at that. And then I started going to therapy, and I didn't want to go to therapy. My doctor made me go to therapy. I'm thinking, oh God, I just want to go back home and sleep. And she reverse psychologied me that day. Of course, I didn't know. As we were walking around the lake, she starts to tell me about her life, how she grew up, and how she met her husband, and college she went to, and some things that happened to her negatively in her life. And I'm thinking, I don't care. You know, and we were walking, we just walked that whole hour, and that entire hour, she had a session with me. And when we were finished, we went back upstairs and I signed out, and she's like, so I'll see you next week? And I said, yeah. That next week I started talking to her. Sadly, it took this for me to realize everybody should be having therapy. My heart hurts for anyone that has had to go through the death of a child. I don't care what age they are, it's still your child. As much as I disliked my mom always making us go to church when we were younger, God, I hated it, sincerely. I felt like we should have packed our bags and just lived there. It gave me a foundation. We don't see the end of our life. We don't see tomorrow or a week from now, but I believe in the Lord, and I believe that He has already planned out our life. And things that He has not planned that happen, such as this, He does in Romans 8:38. He turns it around for our good. Some may say, how is your daughter dying, especially the way she did die? Good. That's not good. But what transpired within my life turned out to be good. Don't suffer alone. You gotta have a good circle around you, especially a good support system. And if you haven't already, seek God, because you're gonna need some type of love beyond the love you get. And you may not have a support system. You're gonna need to learn to lean on something. When you do heal, or as you are healing, my mom told me when we were in the hotel and I was on the bed crying, she was on the chair reading the Bible, and I just cried in the pillow. I soaked that pillow, and she got on her knees and knelt beside me, and she said, you shall live and not die. Janessa's death is not for you. And I didn't understand it at that moment, but I get it now, because I'm able to do things like this, to tell my story, and I'm able to heal each time I tell it. So just have a good support system. even if nothing negative happens in your life, make sure you surround yourself with positive people. My life now is going well. It's going well. I had, it's funny because when Janess died, I literally told God in my anger, I will never have kids again. Because I always just wanted one kid. I met my husband in 2017, December. I was working at a urology clinic and he just kept chasing me and bothering me. I was like, God, this guy's corny. I don't like him. And, he's just bothering me, his patient. And he was so nice. He was just so nice all the time. And finally, after 3 months of him stalking me, I decided to let him take me out to dinner, and we married a year later, January 26th of 2019. And Promise, our daughter, was born May 4th, 2021. She was born 14 weeks early, so she spent 85 days in the NICU, which was very tough. Yeah, she'll be 2 in a few weeks, and it has been a trying time, and I never would have thought I would have, if I was standing there at Janessa's grave again and somebody showed me my future, I would have laughed if I would have seen another kid. I would have laughed. And when I tell you this little girl brings so much joy to me, and I love her. And I told you earlier that I wasn't a great mom to Janess. I was her friend. I wasn't her mom. But I'm a mom now. I'm the mom now to Promise that I should have been to Janess. I have a deeper compassion and empathy for people that go through tragedy. Sometimes when people are crying, don't hug them. Sometimes they need to cry. They need to just let things out, and don't pry in people's lives. The media had did so much, and my daughter's death was deemed accident by asphyxiation, and everybody was calling it a suicide, and it just broke me. So now I just learned not to pry in people's lives, and don't believe everything you read or you hear, the gossip, the rumors. Just let people heal and grieve as they please. And I'm just grateful for this. And this is not about me. It's about helping somebody else get through something they're going through and letting them know they're not alone. And so thank you for reaching out to me and contacting me back and making this possible.